Just comes to mind that somebody asked me this afternoon whether I was going to say anything new tonight. The immediate response was probably not. But the question is, can there be newness in looking and in listening? I think that's all that matters. Not what it is that is heard, but that there's listening and looking and questioning freshly. Not the way we did this morning or this afternoon or last year. That's all past. Somebody asked very recently, we had just met for a meeting, and toward the end of the meeting, the person said, just as a matter of personal curiosity, I would like to ask you whether you believe in God or some religion or something religious. And then this person added, I don't mean the concept of God. So at that point, doesn't one have to ask, what is God if it is not a concept? And to be very clear about one's concepts of God and religion, and that these are, in fact, concepts, ideas, linked with ancient memories and all the emotions that go with ancient ideas and memories. Most of us were raised with some idea about a God or gods. And there was some religion brought into our life, maybe through Sunday school, or I think for a while going to school, even in Germany, there was religion in elementary school, where we were told Bible stories. I had a vivid concept of God because I loved picture books, and these pictures imprinted themselves very, very deeply on the mind. And with the pictures and the stories came emotions of a lot of fear of this God. The definite feeling that one had to be good in order to be in his good graces. That one could not hide behind a tree, because he would see one even if one hid behind a tree, as Adam and Eve did. All of these pictures were vividly present in the book. And in the mind picking it up and fitting it into one's everyday experiences with father and mother. There were other other impressions of God. Having a great love for a certain music. I lived in a town, it was called Leipzig. That's where the churches where Bach did all of his work, most of his work, and they were available twice a week or 3 times a week, free concerts exquisitely performed of all the religious music, with words, with choirs, and these words and the music, this incredible music, and the church, the acoustics there, the vaults, the shape, the upward movement of the whole architecture, all of that impressed itself deeply upon the whole organism. Listening to that music and the words, the praise of God, the fear of God, the mourning about the death of God, and living through all of that with goose pimples all over the body. The shuddering. And then the immediate possibility to attribute this to being touched by the holy, by the sacred. Connected with this God whose praises were sung. I just had very recently an amazing experience. It was visiting a friend in California just a few months ago. And in the evening, he suggested whether he play some music. And suggested the Ninth Symphony. I hadn't heard that symphony in ages. And it was already fairly late, so I said, yeah, let's have that. Let's just put on the last movement. I don't know, is it the last movement where the choir sings the hymn to joy? Most of you may know it, you may not know the words. It was amazing to listen to that. In translation, those words are something like this: joy, beautiful spark of God, we enter drunken your realm. Your magic binds whatever has been separated, and all human beings become brothers where your gentle spirit dwells. And then it goes on, and the music, everything augments and becomes rises to an enormous pitch. I don't know how anybody can sing that high. There's tremendous strain on the sopranos. And it says, "Be embraced, millions. Do you intuit the Creator, world?" Asking the world, do you intuit the Creator in the midst of all of this music? The choir just bursts out, brothers, above the firmament there must live a loving Father. And you're just torn away with all of that. I questioned what was happening. It was amazing. And questioning it and listening, then all this extra dropped off, and there was just the music and just the listening to these words without this, this whole emotional impact. Which was so easily drawn upon, accessible, available. and so easily interpreted, which had not been the case. I didn't interpret it, I just noticed it. So easily interpreted as the presence of the sacred. But there is someone who experiences all this and wallows in it, shudders in it and shivers in it, and loves it because it's so, it can sweep all one's concerns and little worries away for a while, bring out this tremendous enthusiasm for whatever the words suggest. But it is so influenced by thought, by memory, by conditioning. And by what one wants to experience. And holding on to that. Deeply attaching to this kind of a feeling. Is that God? Is that the sacred? In talking with this person, who's very open person, we talked about that anything that was conceptual could not possibly be God. Concepts coming from our memory, our indoctrination, how we were raised, being so utterly limited. So what does one believe in if not in concepts and ideas? Or is belief linked to that? She was trying to find out what one couldn't believe in something that was not a concept. But what is belief? Can we look at it right now? If we say, I believe in something, how can it possibly be separated from what we know? Know through having heard about it, having read about it, having seen pictures about it, or heard magnificent music about it, and remembering all that goes on in listening and looking and hearing. And then believing in that, believing in the power of that to what? To lift one out of worry, insecurity, fear, loneliness. It's all linked with idea, thought, and memory. Do you see that? How can one believe in something that one doesn't know? And how can one find out what God is or may be as long as one has a belief or a concept about it? Belief being intimately connected with knowing, having some kind of an idea of what to believe in. Without that idea there cannot be belief, there can be questioning and doubting and wondering, but not believing. So, is it quite clear that if there is a question of whether there is God or something sacred, holy, beyond all concepts and thoughts, that it is ungraspable through belief and concepts and thoughts. And in order to find out whether there is such a thing, how is one going to go about it? All we know is to picture it, to think about it, to remember or fantasize. But that's our limited past experience and knowledge. We want to go beyond that, but we have no way of doing it. The very desiring to go beyond it is more thought. The very idea of going beyond is idea. Do you see that? So how can one find out what God is? Or whether there is such a thing of God? How can one find out what oneself is? What are we? Ourselves. We who want to find out about God. What are we? What do we know about ourselves? What do we know about ourselves right now as we're sitting here? We know what we look like because we have looked into the mirror. If we hadn't looked into the mirror for 5 years, we would be surprised looking at it. How we've changed. But since we look into the mirror almost daily, we know what we are from the picture reflected by the mirror, which then is an imprint in the brain. And we know our name, our nationality, our race, our sex. Our abilities and aptitudes. Our past history as far as we remember it, which is, of course, very fragmented. We know or do we? Do we know our fears and aspirations? Maybe we know our aspirations more than our fears, because we use our aspirations in order not to face our fears. We know what we are right now, employed or unemployed. We have images about that. What is it that we know about ourselves that is not an image or a piece of knowledge which can be evoked from this memory bank of the brain computer? What do we know about ourselves that isn't knowledge? Idea, image, memory, fantasy, aspiration, future projections of what we will be. The hopes for our future, the fears about our past. Is that what we are? We so often say, when we feel hemmed in by these images we have of ourselves and the images we are hoping other people have of us or fearing they may have of us, when we feel hemmed in by all of this, we so often say, I want to be myself. I want to just be myself. But what is that? What is myself? What is it that I want to be? Free, spontaneous, uncontrolled by all my habits and fears and desires. Is that what I mean when I say I want to be myself? Or do we mean I want to have my own way? Want to do as I please, express myself freely without being inhibited through my own internal inhibitions or external inhibitions I sense will be placed upon me? It's all thought and emotion. What am I when I'm not self-consciously aware of myself, which is what takes place most of the time? Self-consciously aware of oneself in terms of what one thinks one is or should be or shouldn't be. I think every once in a while it happens to all of us that there is a totally unpremeditated moment in which, to one's utter amazement and surprise, there's something which we call spontaneity, naturalness, no feeling of division, not knowing who the other person is, but meeting each other fully, warmly, wholly. Not just each other, but everything around one is there, not known and jaded through what one knows about it, but freshly through this total unpremeditation. At such a moment, if one was asked who one was, one wouldn't even know. Because one is nothing separate from everything that's going on. Oneself is the not knowing. And therefore the freedom. The freedom of living. Not according to one's whims and fancies and opinions and fears and anticipations, according to nothing. There's nothing there according to which one is. There's none of that. I wonder how one would respond if one was asked what God is. Or whether there it would dawn on one that God and me is a duality in thought, a wishful or fearful thinking. As somebody said, when there's no feeling of personal self, there is also no personal God. There's no need for that. Because there's no fear. Which brings me to another topic, this whole topic of insecurity, which is brought up so much in meetings. This utter feeling of insecurity that we usually don't even battle with, that we escape from. Somebody asked, isn't it natural to want to be secure? I don't think needing to be secure as far as having food, keeping warm and dry, clothes to wear, some place to go, some place to live. Well, I don't know how natural it is. You see these days how there are thousands and millions of people who have not enough food, have no place to stay, don't keep dry or warm. Sometimes in looking at the faces of people that are photographed who are in these positions, you don't even sense insecurity. There may be an utter sadness or dullness. The mind may have ceased to try to figure out how to make oneself secure. It's just living the way one lives. Why do we feel insecure? Or what is it to feel insecure? It's immediately connected with thinking again, isn't it? And image. Will I have what I need in the future, in my old age? Will I be loved today, tomorrow? Will I be taken care of? Will I be as respected or loved as others? And if I think I won't, this utter sense of insecurity. And the fear that arises out of it. Fear being, if one examines it, observes it, tracks it down very intensely, carefully, minutely, fear is already the running away from what one does not want to face. The loneliness, the moment we say I, me, mine, and the clinginess, attaching to something, to have something to hold on to. Another person or a god, or an occupation, a lifestyle, clothes, food. Thinking about ourselves in terms of what we were, are, and will be. Assuming that we always will be, hoping that we will be happy. And that in the midst of observing constant change around us, that things aren't today the way they were yesterday. Any place we look, there's change. Whether it's in nature, not just the beauty of the green grass coming up and the flowers and blossoms, the change of a creek after a rain, coming a gushing stream. But also the mudslides, the earthquakes, the fires and tornadoes. And in our human environment, the change in jobs and industry, an industry or a job-giving industry that existed for years and years is gone, and people are out of work. Something new comes up for which so many hundreds and thousands of people have no skill, feel abandoned by the changing times. Because if one lives in any kind of a war-torn or terrorism-torn country, one doesn't know whether the house or the block will be there the next moment. I wonder how it must be to live in Beirut. Or so many Beiruts all over the world. In the midst of this total uncertainty, total insecurity, and complete constant change around us, we want to be secure and safe and certain of our future. It's so absurd, isn't it? I think we're asking for the impossible. And by asking for the impossible, we're driving ourselves crazy. Either driving ourselves crazy with frustration and fear, and then all the ways of securing ourselves, which are never securing ourselves, putting trust in something, and that crumbles, and then the disappointment of feeling betrayed. Somebody leaves one, in whom one put one's whole trust, and the person leaves. And then the agony and dismay, because up comes all the fear that was temporarily bound by having attached to something one was hoping will make one secure in this constantly changing, ever changing world. Why do we want to make ourselves secure when it's impossible? Why do we put up with incessant frustrations. Disappointments, despair, and then building everything up anew, only to see it torn down again. Why isn't it possible to, I'm wondering if it is, to completely flow with change, with life, with whatever is happening? Without resistance or conflict or opposition. Without any dreams of making one's future secure. Without building up something permanent. And what we build up incessantly as something permanent is this image of ourselves as being some permanent entity that will last forever. We don't like to think about our ending, which is the one most certain thing in life, is that we'll end. Because we're afraid of that, we just either have fantasies about not ending or going on after death, or we don't think about it altogether. We repress that fact, and rather cling to making ourselves permanent in our mind and in our attachments. Which is inevitable problem and conflict. Is that clear? All our plans for the future are trying to make something permanent in our minds. And we strive for that, we may attain it, but we're still not secure. Because we may think about future insecurity. Because we want to continue as a permanent, secure entity. Can one question that? Freely, openly, regardless of whatever fears may be met. And meeting those fears how? We said earlier, fear, if one looks carefully, what we call fear is already running away. From what? Can one stay with that? Probe into it. We don't want to do this, but whatever we build up or desire and build up because we don't want to face fear has that fear built into it. And we are afraid for losing what we've built up. What are we? When we cease for a moment making any picture of ourselves, questioning this whole idea of being a permanent, separate entity. And begin to listen to what's actually there. Inside and out, above and below. left and right, front and back. Without knowing. And if it feels insecure or scary, immediately ask, what is this? And then listen. When we listen, we're not thinking. When no thought raises, there is no fear or insecurity. No thought about what's going to happen to me. When the attention is there, the mind is open. There's no room for anticipating a future. It is irrelevant. It distracts or dims listening and seeing what's here now. And here, there's no future, there's no thought. There's only what is. What is it? The moment the brain says, I know what it is, question it. Question what it is if you don't know it. And therefore you've got to look at it freshly, newly, unpreoccupied, unbiased, unprejudiced. Is that possible? Is that humanly possible? Of course it is. If one is passionately interested in what everything is, including oneself. Not one's ideas or other people's ideas or books' ideas about what is, but what actually is, the truth of this moment. The wondering about this will open up every cell in the body. Unconditionally. Whatever may happen to one, one will face it. That's the interesting thing about fear. Most fears only exist in the mind. Because when there's openness to meet what's there, there's no fear, there's action, maybe running away physically. There's enormous energy in that. Or doing what needs to be done, putting out a fire. If one sees a fire, one puts it out. The fear comes afterwards if one thinks, oh my God, what if this if my house had burned down? Or if I had burned with it, then... So one could ask, well, why am I not there now? Where am I? And watch it. In dreams and fantasies and anticipations in the past. And trying to make myself secure out of this whole flood of data. Which has nothing to do with this moment of living. Do you see that? Somebody asked, what does it mean to trust somebody? And talking a little bit opening the topic up. Of course, what came out is I do want to be able to trust somebody. But I don't really know what it means to trust somebody. I don't know either. Does it mean that when one has a bookkeeper, one trusts that he or she doesn't make false entries and absconds with half of the money? Well, how can one trust somebody? One has to live together and see what happens. A person who is trustworthy today may, for whatever reason, I may not even know, do something that is totally unexpected and amazing. But I don't know what happened. Trusting, wanting to trust somebody also means wanting to make that person permanently so. I like the way he or she is right now, and I want him or her to remain that way so I can be secure in his presence or her presence. Is that what it means to trust somebody? To hope that he or she will continue this way and not let me down, not disappoint me or leave me or abandon me. But how do we know how we respond? We don't even know how we ourselves respond. What are we trying to put upon somebody else? And why do we want to put something upon somebody else? Again, the future, the insecurity, and trying to negotiate the waters like these boats that have their stability on the outside. I think they're called catamarans, something like that. Something to the left and something to the right. The boat without that couldn't stay afloat. And of course in that there's fear. I don't mean the boat will drop that. The moment one trusts somebody, puts one's trust into somebody, and I'm not talking about bookkeeping right now. There one has to live together and to watch together. But for one's own personal security, to put one's trust into someone else is the atrophying of seeing and living freely. Fully, deeply. Lovingly. Not trying to pull the goods in. It doesn't work. And it plugs. It plugs one up. Something withers or never comes to life. Which is not a permanent self. Which is not an idea, it's not a trust, it's not a refuge. What is it? And why are we afraid of meeting it? which doesn't mean to withdraw from people, from the world. On the contrary, it's the only way of living together without fear, without antagonism. With love that is not demanded from someone else. We will end here for today.